Wonderful. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our third Elul challenge, the conclusion of the first week. And today we're going to be starting to look at the lesson 282 of Likutei Moharan. In its original printing, this was the lesson that ended the first volume. Because if you remember way back on Monday, I talked about how the Likutei Moharan was published in 2 volumes. Originally, in the original publication, this lesson ended the first volume. In subsequent publications, it didn't. Rabbi Nachman's student, Reb Nosson, his great disciple, added a few extra lessons to the end of multiple subsequent publications. But in the original publication, this was the final lesson of the first volume. And it's one of the seminal lessons of Breslover ideology and philosophy. It's considered one of the most important lessons, as we'll see in a note that Reb Nosson adds to the end of one of the sections of this lesson. This lesson was taught, quote unquote, in 2 parts. Okay, the first part of the lesson consists of the first 2 sections, because this lesson has 6 sections all told. The first 2 parts of this lesson were taught by Rabbi Nachman on Shmini Atzeret of 1807. And that's when he delivered the first 2 parts of the lesson. Okay. After that, he left his community to go to Lvov, or it was called Lemberg at the time, because he was dealing with a bout of tuberculosis. Okay. And he needed to go to Lemberg for treatment. There were other reasons, supposedly, why he might have also been going to Lemberg, but he had medical issues. And so he left his community not long after delivering the first 2 sections of this lesson. And his 2 great disciples, Reb Nosson, and I can't remember the name of the second one at the moment. It's in the book. I'll think about that. But 2 of his great disciples were very concerned that they didn't know when they were going to see him again. And they felt very disconnected from his Torah. So what did they do? Well, they started following him to Lvov, right, to try to catch up with him. And they caught up with him somewhere outside of Lvov, and they got him to teach them some Torah. And that's when he conveyed sections 3 through 6 of this lesson. Okay, so you have to sort of think about that as we go through this lesson, that sections 1 and 2 are one unit kind of the lesson, and sections 3 through 6 are another. They are all connected in some way, but there is a bit of a change in tone between the 2 parts of the lesson, just given the fact that the first 2 sections were much more formally taught, and the last sections from 3 to the end were taught a little bit sort of less formally recorded and then put on to complete this lesson. And again, as I said, this lesson is considered one of the most important in terms of what it means to have a religious life, at least according to the Breslovers. And the second is the one we'll start after this, which is on Hitbodedut, clinging to God and developing your own personal relationship with God. So for those who are watching this via the YouTube channel, you can access the study sheet and follow along as we go through this lesson. So let's start. So the lesson opens with a quote from Pirkei Avot, Da. Okay, now the Da isn't part of the quote. That's Rabbi Nachman, right, saying, understand this. This is very important. Da, right? Ki tzarich ladun et kol adam lechaf zechut, right? So you must judge everyone favorably. This is from Pirkei Avot, right? This is the first chapter, the 6th Mishnah of Pirkei Avot. And this is the words of Rabbi Yehoshua ben Perachia. He says 3 things. He says, get yourself a teacher, acquire a friend, and judge everyone favorably. Okay, so those are the words of one of our earliest sages, Yehoshua ben Perachia, from Pirkei Avot, right? Get yourself a teacher, acquire a friend, and judge everybody favorably. And Rabbi Nachman is going to focus in now at the end of this Mishnah, right? What does it mean that we should judge everyone favorably. Okay, so he goes on. Even someone who is completely wicked, it is necessary to search and find in him some modicum of good. That in that little bit, and that's going to be an important word, right? Me'at tov, right? In that little bit, he is good. Okay? And by finding in him a modicum of good and judging him favorably, one genuinely elevates him to the scale of merit and can bring him to repent. Now, Rabbi Nachman, when he said this, is only talking about Jews. Okay, that we have to make that very clear in the context of this lesson. However, I don't believe that it is meant to stay within just the Jewish community. But we have to understand in his milieu and in his world, when he's talking about finding that modicum of good in someone who is considered to be completely wicked, right? He is talking very specifically about the Jewish community, because he makes a statement, not in this lesson, but in other lessons, that even if a Jewish person is completely wicked, the fact that they still identify as a Jew is that little bit of good that you are then supposed to find, right? Right? And but I do not, when we address this, want to think of this as just pertaining to Jewish people, because this has universal application. And we have to look at this in a broad sense, okay? And so we're not going to put the sort of blinders on that he did, okay? So what he says is, again, so you have to look and find that little bit of good in every single person, right? In each person, even if they are completely wicked. You have to search in that person, you have to find the modicum of good, and you have to judge them fairly. Where does he get this from? He gets this from Psalm 37, verse 10, okay? Because as he says in the next verse, this is the aspect of this verse from Tehillim, okay? And the verse from Tehillim, right, which is the Psalms, Psalm 37, verse 10, Ve'od me'at ve'ein rasha, ve'hit bonanta al mekomo ve'einenu. Okay, now this psalm, Psalm 37, is a psalm that on its face is a psalm about why we should not envy the wicked, why we should not envy those people that, bring about chaos and evil in the world. And why should we not envy the wicked according to the psalm? The psalm says, because ve'od me'at ve'ein rasha, right? Now, the word is od. Od means more, and me'at means little, right? Because le'at in Hebrew, little by little, right? So the psalm says, ve'od me'at, okay? A little more, ve'ein rasha, and there is no wicked, okay? That's why we shouldn't envy the wicked, because they're fleeting, right? Because in a little more, and in this case, the psalm means a little more time. It's a measure of time, ve'od me'at, right? Ve'ein rasha, there's no wicked. Ve'hit bonanta, you'll meditate on them, you'll think about them, al mekomo, in their place, ve'einenu, and they won't be there. They're no more, right? And he's going to take this verse and turn the ve'od me'at from a measure of time into, in his interpretation, right? Ve'od me'at. Instead of saying a little more, he's going to translate that as a little bit. So that means, that's where he's getting this idea that you have to search for that little bit of good in someone. You have to search for that ve'od me'at, right? So that's what he goes on to say. That is, the scripture warns to judge everyone favorably. Even if you see that he is completely wicked, you must search and seek the little bit of good in him wherein he is not wicked, okay? And this is, right, what the psalm means. In yet a little bit, the wicked is not. That's how he's going to translate it. He's not going to say, and a little more, and the wicked man is, and the wicked is not. He's going to be very personal about this. In yet a little bit, right? Ve'od me'at. The wicked man, the Rasha, is not, because it says ve'ein Rasha. You must seek yet a little bit of good that he still has within him, because in that place he is not wicked. For although he is wicked, how is it possible that he does not still possess even a little bit of good? Is it possible that throughout his life he never once did some mitzvah or good deed? And by your finding in him yet a little bit of good wherein he is not wicked, and you're judging him favorably, you generally elevate him from the scale of guilt to the scale of merit, until as a result of this, he returns, parenthetically, of course, he means to God, but he returns in repentance. Thus, this is, in yet a little bit, the wicked man is not. By finding in the wicked person yet a little bit of good, as a result of that, you get the end of the psalm. You will reflect, you will meditate upon his place, the enenu, and he won't be there. That is, when you consider and contemplate his place and level, he's no longer there in his original place. For by finding in him yet a little bit of good, some good point, and judging him favorably, we generally move him from the scale of guilt to the scale of merit. Okay. Now, first of all, you must understand, Rabbi Nachman and his disciples do not believe that this is easy. This is one of the most difficult things anyone can be asked to do, to find that little bit of good in everyone, to actually live up to the verse in Pirkei Avot, to judge everyone favorably. This is one of the most hardest things that Hashem asks of us, according to Rabbi Nachman. Okay? But Rabbi Nachman says, once you start, and he'll explain this even more, once you start finding that little bit of good, then you do literally move that person. Because once you find the little bit of good in that person, then you no longer consider them wicked, and so then you can't put them in the category of the wicked anymore. You can't keep them in the place that you've put them. They immediately move then from being in category B over to the lowest rung of category A, right? You do, because mentally, if you're no longer thinking of them as completely wicked, then you have to re-identify where you place them, right? And so even if they end up then, or, at the bottom of category A, right, at least they're no longer in category B in your mind, completely wicked, right? And you'll treat them differently, and you'll understand them differently, and you'll relate to them differently, right? That and this is essential, right? Because as he said, are you actually going to look at a person and say that there is not one positive thing about that person, not one good quality about that person? Can we truly look at another human being and say that and classify that? And what does it mean about us if we are able to do that? Right? And so that's what he's really, really getting at here. This idea that you must, and it's not easy. You must do this, right? Because if not, then you're going to despair of your fellow human beings. And that's not what the Torah calls us to do. The Torah doesn't call us to despair of our fellow human beings, right? Because ultimately, right, if we're all created in the image and likeness of God, maybe that's the one thing that you're going to have to cling on to. But you got to find something. Okay, so yes, Marnie.
Well, does a person who is evil and is suddenly treated differently, does that person react to the change of in that how they're...
Rabbi Nachman would say yes, because because think about it, if you are interacting with a person, okay, and that person, let's say, is known as wicked, right, is a Rasha, but yet you have taken the time to find in the Rasha some tiny modicum of good, that's going to affect how you interact with that person. And therefore, because that person will sense how you interact with them and how that's changed, that could be one of the things that motivates them even deeper into the tshuva process, as we'll see in section 2. Okay. Right. But yes, I think you're right, because the minute you no longer classify someone as completely evil, the moment you find that modicum of good, your energy toward that person will change. Your interaction with that person will change. Okay. And that has ripple effects, right? Because, if I treat someone as if they're irredeemable versus if I treat someone as wicked, but I've identified that spark of goodness in them, that's different. I am gonna, right? Because it means I have hope, right? And that then can be transferred to that person, and maybe I can impart into them a sense of hope, right? So yeah, Ari, you had your hand up. You were gonna.
There's a consistent approach here about using a certain thought technique to elevate yourself and to elevate others. The elevation of yourself is looking back to find that germ of joy and letting that lead you in life and in the present. And then there's this notion of renewal. And then there is this, it's very consistent.
Yes.
You've got this wicked individual, find the good in the past, and you let that affect. I think Marnie was right on it. It helps you behave differently towards that person. That gives them a chance to renew themselves
right
in the moment. So there's this constant idea of renewal and space for change
right
in our behaviors towards one another. That's through this thought technique of taking something that was good or joyful from the past and letting it lead you in the present.
Right. I mean, and the thing is, sure, okay, and hopefully with a wicked person, maybe you don't have to go too far back, but even so, you should search and search and search and search and search and search until you find that thing. We cannot look at another human being and deem them to be irredeemable and completely wicked, as such that they are irredeemable. Okay. Now, I ask your question, then I have a note from Reb Nosson. Yes. Yeah.
This system with the Jewish concept, because there are many instances the Bible with the stone, whatever.
Right.
And so therefore that would be, according to this, there is no ounce.
Right.
So hope.
Right. So you have to remember, Reb Nachman is a rabbi that is standing on the shoulders of centuries of rabbinic commentary, and the rabbis hate the death penalty and make it almost impossible to inflict. Right. So even though there's all this capital punishment in the Torah, the starting right with the ancient sages, right, who say that if the Jewish court kills one person in 70 years, they're called bloodthirsty. Right? They hate capital punishment. So the rabbis take all of that capital punishment from the Torah and interpret it in such a way where we cannot inflict the death penalty unless so many things are met. Right? So Rabbi Nachman is standing on that heritage. Right? So he's standing on a heritage where he sees all that capital punishment in the Torah, but it's never going to be enacted because you'll never find a person that will be able to check off all the different boxes that the rabbis have set up from interpreting the Torah that will allow capital punishment to take place. It happens once in a while. Even then, the rabbis always say you should err on the side of compassion, right? Because like I said, I love the phrase in the Talmud that if the Sanhedrin executes one person in 70 years, everyone calls them bloodthirsty. They should be seen as a bloodthirsty court. Right. So that's where we're coming from here. So for Rabbi Nachman, there is no contradiction because he knows that you're never going to check off all those boxes. Why? Because you're going to find something where the person didn't live up to this standard, right? So ultimately that translates for him into there's always that modicum of good. So for him, yeah, this is a consistent thought process. Now, in the Breslover edition of the Likutei Moharan, Reb Nosson has a note about this because, the the temptation here is, well, wait a minute. If I have to find some modicum of good in a wicked person, what am I saying? That they're not wicked? No. No. So here's the note. Okay. So he says that elsewhere, right, in other lessons, Rabbi Nachman will teach one who speaks well of the wicked is also called wicked. Right? So how does this seem to square with this lesson? Okay. If so, how can we judge the wicked favorably? However, as we have seen, by finding good in a wicked person, we genuinely elevate them to the scale of merit. As a result, the wicked man is not any longer. The credit we attribute to them is not considered finding good in someone who is wicked, right? So in other words, it's not considered, right, that we're somehow diminishing their wickedness, right? We also need to keep this distinction clear. Finding a modicum of good in a wicked person should not be confused with explaining away their evil deeds or calling them good. Just because we're told to find the modicum of good in someone doesn't mean that we then can call them good. But we found the spark, right? And it doesn't mean that we ever excuse the evil that they did. No, this isn't an escape clause, right? According to the Rabbi Noson's understanding of Rabbi Nachman, right? You can find the bit of good in someone and still say, what an evil SOB. But you say that, what an evil person. But yet, because there's that little bit of good that you have found in that person, you're going to think of them in a different way, right? You're not going to despair of them. You're not going to treat them as if they're subhuman. You're not going to treat them as if they don't matter. You're not, right? And if anything, your ability to find that spark maybe can actually get them on the road to one day maybe not being called Rasha. And here's his little story about this, right? Let's see. So Reb Noson got visited by Reb Meir of Teplik, right? Who asked him about a certain individual living in Teplik, right? And Reb Noson asked this of Reb Meir, right, about this person. And Reb Meir answered, oh, him, right? As if to say that man wasn't much to talk about, okay? And so Reb Noson says, if you're going to look at things negatively, you'll find fault with everyone in the whole world. Think of the people living in Teplik. Start with the person living at the far end of town. If you look at him carefully, you'll certainly find some shortcoming. Now go from house to house until you get to your house. Are you the only good Jew in Teplik? Right? Right? And to which Reb Noson says, me? I'm not very righteous. Right? Sorry, so to which right. And so Reb Meir replied, if you're not, right, then who is? Right? If one of the Rebbes in the town isn't right, then if you say you're not righteous, well, then who is? If you can't call yourself righteous, who is? Right? So if you view others positively, you'll find some good even in the worst person, and then certainly in those who are not so wicked, including yourself. Okay. That then goes into the next part of the lesson, right? So the whole point, sorry, Lila, yes.
What defines wicked?
He doesn't say in this lesson. He doesn't. I think what he's saying is maybe that's also part of the problem. What does define wicked, right? But he does not give us a definition of wicked in this lesson. He doesn't, right? But even if, even if, it's kind of generally known, oh, this is a good person. This is a wicked person, right? But no, there are no definitions of what defines wicked. I would assume it's someone who has fallen from the highest levels of Torah observance, right? I mean, thinking in Rabbi Nachman's way, right? Someone who is, doesn't have a deep relationship with the divine, someone who's a philanderer, someone who, doesn't in any way acknowledge Torah law, right? Things like that, I would assume. But we can broaden it, definitely. Okay, so first Marnie, then Ari.
Okay. Because there's an obligation to fix the broken world, is there an obligation to find the good in the wicked?
Yes, according to Rabbi Nachman, yes. According to Rabbi, yes, you'll see as we go on, this is one of the most important teachings, right? Rabbi Nosson makes a note that this is one of the most important teachings of all of Rabbi Nachman, that we must find that modicum of good in each and every person, right? And that we must strive always, always to live by this dictum, right? That's why he opens it with the da, no, right?
Yeah.
No, this is a biggie, okay? And like I said, and he acknowledges this is the most difficult thing for any human being to do. It's the most difficult thing that's ever asked of the human being, right? To find the modicum of good in every person, okay? So that you don't see anyone as completely evil, okay? Not to excuse their evil deeds, right? Not to do that at all, but that even with all of the evil deeds and everything, you have to find, because as he said right before, what you're saying, there's not one good thing that this person ever did in their entire life, ever? Okay. Yes, Maxine. No worries.
How does that square with Stern?
Oh, well, I did read that note, right? There's a difference from excusing their evil deeds and calling them good. You're not calling the wicked person good. You're finding the modicum of good in the wicked person. That doesn't mean you excuse their deeds, right? But when you look at a person, you have to acknowledge that there has to be something, right? And you have to search for it. You have to search for it no matter how long it takes, no matter how deep you have to go. You must, right, search for it.
So 2 things. This is really kind of like the actor's ethic, because an actor playing an evil person has to not necessarily excuse the things the evil person did, but in order to play them authentically and genuinely and sincerely, they have to be able to find the modicum of good and understand those aspects. The second thing is the idea. It's amazing you picked up on this. Because I think it's important. Is that the relative by not defining wickedness, so it lends itself to the relativization of wickedness.
Right.
And a wicked person also sees a good and wicked people. And so this lesson applies to the wicked as it does to the good.
Yeah.
And it speaks to the wickedness in us, for us to look at others. And if it speaks to the wicked people to say, look at others who are wicked, it allows the wicked people to have merit themselves by changing their behaviors and looking at and granting other people's the opportunity.
Right.
So by not defining wickedness, it applies to everyone.
Right.
And you're not marginalizing people who would say, oh, it doesn't.
Right.
It even applies to the wicked. And so the
Right.
wicked can change their behaviors and then further elevate themselves as well.
And thank you for providing the bridge into the second part of the lesson. Okay, so, right. So likewise, a person must find some good point within himself. Right? So that's the thing. So not only do we have to do that for others, but likewise, a person must find some good point within himself. It is known that a person must take care to be happy always. We saw that in the lessons on Wednesday, right? That we have to serve God b'simcha, always, okay? And to keep very far away from depression, as has been explained in our works a number of times, right? Rabbi Nachman constantly goes back to serving God b'simcha, right? And as I said, because Rabbi Nachman probably had clinical depression or some type of mental disorder, right? He's working through that in his ideology and theology. Okay. So just as you have to look at someone else and find the modicum of good, you must look deep within you and find the modicum of good. It may be that when he begins examining himself, he sees that he possesses no good whatsoever and is filled with sin. And that is a result of the evil one. As a result, the evil one. Now, evil one here is interesting. Evil one in this lesson is always written in Hebrew as Baal Davar, right? The Lord of things or the Lord of words. That's how that's what is translated by the Breslovers as the evil one, Baal Davar. Just let that play around because we're not talking about a Satan or anything, right? So this is the master of words. So I'm wondering if he's talking about sometimes those things that go on in our mind, our words, our thoughts, right? Those things that go on in our minds that cause us to think of ourselves as unworthy, as evil. And remember, this is a man most likely suffering from depression and other mental maladies, Okay. Yes, Lila.
Oh, is that like the yes, so and yes,
It could be. It could be how he's trying to describe the Yetzer Hara. Okay. They translate it as evil one, but don't think of it as a Satan or an angel, right? It's always in this lesson called Baal Davar, right? Master of words or master of things. That's what they think of, right? So, and that as a result, the Baal Davar, the master of things or the master of words, right, wants to push him into depression and sadness. God forbid. Okay, right? Even so, it is forbidden to fall on account of this. Rather, he must search until he finds in himself some bit of good. For how is it possible that throughout his life he never once did some mitzvah or good deed? And even if when he begins examining the good thing, he sees that in that too, it's filled with flaws and contains purity and no purity. Right? He sees that the mitzvah or holy deed that he merited doing is itself compromised by impure motives or external thoughts and numerous faults. Nevertheless, how is it possible that this mitzvah or holy deed contains not even a little bit of good? For in any case, despite this, there must have been some good point in the mitzvah or good deed that he did, even if he did it for ulterior motives, even if he did it for the wrong reasons. There must be something good. Right? Think about, here's a man who is probably a depressive saying, you can't give in to this. You can't think of yourself as unworthy. You can't, even if you're evil and you're going to think of yourself as evil, you still got to find, you did nothing in your life that's merited nothing good. And even if you did the good stuff for ulterior motives, that didn't have any good effect. You have no place to start from to rebuild. You have no anchor to anchor on to you, right? And to give you some type of solidity in your life. There is no bright point, right? I mean, and that's what he's, and I can understand that, right? If you work with people who have depression, right, or mental illness, right, what do they, right? No, there's nothing about me, right? Why then do they have suicidal ideation? Right? There's nothing good about me. I'm worthless. I'm pointless. I give nothing to the world. And as a result, they pull themselves deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper down. And how do we do that? Right? I'm a failure. I haven't succeeded. I haven't done what I'm supposed to have done in my life. Nothing I do matters, right? Even the things I do, I'm doing for just my own self. No, but you got to dig deep and you got to focus on something. You got to find the anchor. You got to do it for others, and you got to do it for yourself, right? Because sometimes it's easier to be altruistic and find that good point in others and say, well, they might have the good point, but I'm still completely unsavable and unbad, and that's it. It's all, I can maybe be a little bit more gracious to my neighbor, but for myself, no. And Rabbi Nachman says you can't do that. If you're going to do it for others, more importantly, you got to do it for yourself, okay? You've got to do it for yourself. So, going on, right? Thus, a person has to search and seek to find in himself some little bit of good in order to revive himself and to attain joy, as explained above, right? Remember in our lesson about Besimcha, how you're supposed to go back and think about when light did shine on you and bring that into the present. Okay. By searching until he finds a remaining little bit of good in himself, he genuinely moves from the scale of guilt to the scale of merit and can return in repentance. This is the aspect of, in yet a little bit, the wicked man is not. You will reflect upon his place, and he will not be there, as explained above, right? If you actually can do that for yourself and think of yourself as not completely wicked, right? Then you can actually move yourself into a place where you can make changes, just like he explained. If you can do that for others, you can do that for yourself. Once you find the little bit, enrich, right? Enrich, and then you can start the process, okay? That is, just as has been explained above, that we must judge others favorably, even the wicked, and find in them some good point, and by doing so move them from the scale of guilt to the scale of merit. in the aspect of, in yet a little bit, and then the end of the verse, you will reflect. The same applies with regard to oneself. A person has to judge himself favorably and find in himself some remaining good point in order to give him the strength to avoid falling completely, God forbid. On the contrary, he will revive himself and bring joy to his soul with the little bit of good he finds in himself, that once in his life he merited doing a mitzvah or good deed. Okay? Likewise, he must go on searching until he finds in himself then yet another good thing, because now this becomes a process. If you can find one good thing, you can find two good things. If you can find two good things, you can find three good things. If you can find three, you can find four, and so on, right? So now it becomes a process, okay? And although this good thing too is mixed with such impurity, still he must extract some good point from there as well. Indeed, he must go on searching and gathering further good points, okay? So you got to do it. You got to find the one good thing, you got to extract it somehow, and then you got to do it again and again and again and again and again. And you got to build up your melody. This is the most beautiful thing. And it is through this that melodies are made. It is through finding and extracting and sifting out the good in all of the things that we can in our lives, that we extract the good from the evil, we find the spark of good, and we weave them together, and that is what music is made out of. That is what melodies are made out of. When we sing in that room, our songs reflect the fact that we are able to sift out those little sparks of good and weave them together in a melody. Because as Rabbi Nachman is going to go on and say, if you can't do that, you can't pray. You'll sit dumb and mute in the synagogue and not be able to lift up your voice. The only reason why you can lift up your voice with any sincerity is because you have found the bits of good and you've woven them together. Melodies are made from the process of finding the good in ourselves and others, bit by bit by bit, step by step by step, and weaving them together into something beautiful. Right? As explained elsewhere, the aspect of playing a musical instrument is the aspect of gathering the good ruach, the good wind, the good spirit, from the ruach of gloom, depression, right? And that's what he's saying. If you think about playing an instrument, what do you got to do? You got to figure out, where do I place my finger on the clef? Where do I press the valve? And I got to press it in the right place, because if I press it here, that's the bad wind. And if I press it here, that's the good wind. And you find where on the instrument are all of the good points to make the good notes. And then you take it and you weave all those good points together to make the melody. That's what we're doing spiritually. We're isolating the bad ruach, the points where, no, this is not right. No, oh, there's the sweet spot. There's the good. There's the good right there. I found it. I found the good. Now I have a note. And that, there's the other good. And that's what we're supposed to be doing. I'm not an evil person. I'm not totally irredeemable. Oh, there it is. There's my good. I found it. Oh, okay. If I can find this one, then I found that one. Now I can go here to here. Oh, I found another one. And that's how the musician plays. And that's how music is created. And that's how physical music is created. And that's how spiritual music is created. Yes.
So just to take it further, I was always taught when jamming live or blues or jazz, if you make an error in the key that you're playing in, just repeat the error enough time, and it'll turn into a new jam, in a new groove.
Right. Well,
so there's even this element of finding the good within yourself. Just repeat the process,
right,
repeat it, and then it will find.
Right. But I mean, what a magnificent metaphor! What an absolute magnificent metaphor, right? To relate it to the idea of learning how to play music properly. Right, that you gotta find it. And sometimes it's, I mean, think about and it's so hard to find that sweet spot where the note resonates. But you find it, and you work through, and I got it. Aha, right? And it's the same thing. Where is the good? Where is the spark? Where is the good ruach within me? I can't find it. It seems all clouded and covered. And that's not it. No, that's that. Got it. And then, right, and just like in playing an instrument, when you find the sweet spot and you get the note, don't you feel great about yourself? Right? So you find that spark of good that's still in you, and then you feel good. And then you got to do that for your neighbor as well. You got to be able to look at them and find that place on the fret where that, because you got to be able to look at your neighbor too and say, okay, that's something to work with, right? Something to start with.
Sorry,
Yeah.
There's just one person that comes to mind when I'm thinking. Yitzhak Perlman. He was playing a concerto, and first of all, he's a person that's overcome polio, and
Right.
as we all know. And anyways, he was in the middle of a concert, and a string broke, and he continued to play on, and they offered to replace his violin, and he decided, and he just continued as if. And he just transposed everything onto the other 3 strings on the spot.
Right.
So finding the notes.
Right.
But the other lesson in which we learned with in Musar in the attribute of gratefulness in gratitude is his lesson is you work with what you've got. And music comes from with what you've got. And so this is also it's very consistent with these things here.
Yeah. No. So going on.
I was
Oh,
thinking
sorry. Yes, sorry, Rita. Yes.
Rogers and Hammerstein, but I wonder if they took that line from here. I think it's from Sound of Music, that someone in some place in my life, I must have
Done something right
good.
somewhere in my youth or childhood. I must have done something good. Right. Well, I mean, but that's right. That's what this is, right? Right. And that there is that. You cannot say there isn't. Right. You cannot, because again, you've never done anything, right? Because that's right. Think of the absurdity of that statement, is what Rabbi Nachman is saying. Never once. I mean, even if it was when you were 2, right? You never once did anything. Okay. So going on, right? Therefore, by not letting himself fall, but reviving himself by searching and seeking until he finds in himself some good points, gathering and separating those good points from the evil and impurity within him. Through this, melodies are made, as explained above. Then he is able to pray and sing and give praise to God. For it is known that when a person becomes depressed over his gross physicality and evil deeds and sees how very distant he truly is from holiness, it generally makes him completely incapable of praying. He cannot even open his mouth at all due to the magnitude of the depression, sadness, and heaviness that come over him when he sees how exceedingly distant he is from God. However, if he revives himself by means of the aforementioned suggestion, that is, although he knows within himself that he committed evil deeds and numerous sins, and that he is exceedingly distant from God, yet he nevertheless searches and seeks until he finds some remaining good points in himself, as explained above. And he brings himself vitality and joy through this. For it is certainly right that a person feel ever-increasing joy over every good point stemming from the holiness of Israel that he yet finds in himself. Then when he revives himself and brings himself to joy through this, as explained above, he will then be able to pray, sing, and give praise to God. Right? That's where prayer comes from. That's where praise comes from the work of sifting out the good points from the bad in who we believe we are, and stringing those good points together in a melody. Right? And this is the aspect of, and this is where the title of the lesson comes from. Again, from Tehillim. This is Psalm 146. We sing this every morning, right after the Ashrei. Psalm 146, right? Azamra Elohai be'odi. I will sing to God with my od. Right? Od means more, right? So I will sing to God be'odi, in my moreness. And what does he do? As a good rabbi, he takes the od and connects it to od me'at. That little bit of good. That's what allows me to sing. Because be'odi is the od of ve'od me'at. The little bit in which there is no evil, according to Psalm 37, that is what then allows me to sing to God. Okay? Specifically, be'odi, by means of my od that I find in myself. The aspect of that was explained in yet a little bit, the wicked man is not. As explained above, by means of this point, I am able to sing and give praise to God as explained above. And this is specifically, I will sing the songs and melodies that are made by gathering the good points as explained above. That's how I pray. That's how I praise. That's how I could even say start the work of Tikkun Olam, right? I do it because I do the work of finding that good. I judge others. I judge myself fairly. I don't excuse the evil, but I acknowledge that there must be a sweet spot somewhere within me. And I find one, and I find another, and then I can open up, because then I'm not overburdened by by my faults and my failures. I'm not burdened. I can open. And when I can open, I can stand before God in all of my imperfection, but yet sing from all of that beauty that is truly within me, right? Yes.
This is a master class on gratitude. Gratitude, by definition, is finding the good in what you have and appreciate it. And so this really is a variety of techniques, thought techniques, and ethics around gratitude and things that, might not be all about gratitude, but gratitude is definitely at the core here.
Oh, it is. No, because I guess gratitude is what springs from it.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
Gratitude springs from it, because as you piece the bits of light together, as you sift them out and weave them into the melody, you then become grateful. I'm grateful for this little piece of goodness that I uncovered when I was 5 and I helped grandma do whatever. Right. Or when I was, in my teens, and even though I was a real SOB to my parents, I still did this. Right. Or even, I cut the lawn because I knew I was getting $20 for cutting the lawn, and I really wanted that magazine or that video game. But you know what? I cut the lawn for all those people, and they needed me to cut the lawn. Aha. Right. That's the process of what he's saying, right? Even if you find and you think to yourself, yeah, but I did that because I wanted to get the video game. I wanted to buy the phone, right? No, you still did it. And that's something you can sift out, right?
The external part of depression is anger. And forgiving the anger and allowing the good, this is what he's talking about.
Yeah, that's right. It's 3 minutes before service. We didn't get to the end of the second section. The end that will start on Monday is a note from Reb Nosson concluding this. And then the lesson will shift a little bit, because I said there's a change between these first 2 sections that were delivered on Shemini Atzeret, 1807, and then the other sections, 3 through 6, which are part of a Torah study session that he did near Lemberg. But thank you all for being a part of this. Let's go in and pray, and we'll take this up after Shabbat on Monday.